There was a period of time where it was a little difficult actually being a fan of Bleach and reading it on a weekly basis. And from my perspective, what I mean is obviously during the Fullbring arc, where we had just come off the massive battle with Aizen, things changed considerably. And a lot of people really didn't like that, and they didn't take to the arc very well. And for someone like me, who would visit the forums after every single chapter, you know, whether that was like One Manga or Bleach Asylum or something like that, and you would get people just, you know, either super disappointed or just really, really not liking the story or where it was going. And, you know, I was enjoying it every week still. And I was like, I still like this. You know, everyone's really hating on Bleach at the moment, but I think it's cool. And, you know, the Fullbring arc, yeah, openly is nothing like we've ever really seen before. It takes its time in giving us an arc that dives deep into the bonds that connect our main set of heroes. Obviously, tonally, it is completely different from anything we've ever seen before. It's very dark. There are some aspects that feel like it's out of like a noir detective genre. It's just considerably more mature, I think, than anything we'd ever seen in the series prior. And I'm not going to sit here and say that the people who didn't like it were wrong. Obviously, you know, they can have their own opinions. But for me, it represented a change in the storytelling and the way Kubo wanted to depict the world of Bleach. And now that the Aizen battle and the fights with the Espada were a distant memory, he was going to try and deal with some slightly more mature themes. And I had no problem with that. And actually, I think the arc, especially in retrospect, when you're able to look at it all from this privileged position of hindsight where you can just sit back and, you know, enjoy the arc in like the 5 volumes that it actually is, it does a wonderful job of taking Ichigo's character and just tearing him down and then building him up again. That's what the arc is all about. It's about breaking down the main character and then building him back, both literally and figuratively. And so it makes sense then for Kubo to give Ichigo his absolute lowest point in this arc, when the story is at its darkest, both thematically and in terms of what we're actually seeing on screen as well. The arc goes places I don't think anyone ever really expected. And so in this video, I want to take a look at the moment Ichigo decides he's willing to kill someone in cold blood to escape what appears to be an inescapable situation. It's a fascinating moment of Ichigo's character development that comes at the apex of an arc a lot of people didn't enjoy. But I think the Fullbring arc, or the Lost Agent arc, whatever you want to call it, is vital for the development it gives, especially Ichigo, but also to the rest of the Karakura gang as well, and also for introducing 2 of my favourite bad guys in the series. Before we begin, however, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now. We are just literally about 1,000 subs away from 70k, which would just be incredible. And I really, really do appreciate your support so much. So if you hit that button, that would just be absolutely fantastic. Give the video a thumbs up as well if you enjoyed it, because it really does help with exposure and just getting this video out there to more Bleach fans on YouTube. And also, if you do want to take that support a step further, we do now have a Patreon for the channel as well, where you can support me there for as little as $1 a month, and you can also get videos early there too. So I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has already become a patron of the channel so far. Going back now and looking at this arc, and it can be difficult to read, although it's a little bit more liberating knowing that everything turns out alright in the end. But reading this on a weekly basis as the arc was escalating to its climax and things were just spiraling out of control for Ichigo, it wasn't hard to be on the same page as him. So for a little context, the villain Tsukishima has basically enacted his master plan, and he's used his Fullbring all throughout this arc to basically imprint himself on Ichigo's closest friends and family, attacking the one thing that means the absolute most to him. And right at the end of this arc, Tsukishima's gambit is revealed, and suddenly Ichigo's friends and family all turn not against him, but they act as though Tsukishima has been a close presence in their lives all along, and not some stranger who has just kind of inserted himself into their lives artificially. It's chilling, it is terrifying, and it is incredibly well done. And it does sort of feel like it comes out of nowhere, but also not. It's built up very well. And in my opinion, one of the best things about the Lost Agent arc is the smaller scale means that Kubo clearly had time to properly plan out this story, and it really shows. It really shows because there's payoff from moments earlier in the arc that work really well. Like Orihime is first cut by Tsukishima right at the start of this arc, and then it comes back in a big way right at the end. And so Ichigo is the only one in Karakura Town, it seems, that knows Tsukishima for what he really is. And, you know, Tsukishima is just sitting there in Ichigo's living room at one point, and his two sisters, like, they mean so much to him, are like, Ichigo, look, it's Uncle Shu. He's just come out of nowhere. He's back again. And it's so nice to have him back in our lives. Tsukishima invites Ichigo's friends over. Ichigo punches Tsukishima in the face, and his friends, like, lose their minds. And as Ichigo, like, runs away and tries to, you know, take solace in his part-time job with Ikumi, it turns out that she's been cut as well. And it just barrels. It builds and builds, and it escalates until we get, like, this horror movie vibe, where Ichigo is just absolutely a shell of a man. Apparently the only person he can turn to is Ginjo. And it's just so dark. It's so dark and so well done. And it takes the series to a place I never imagined it would go. This is a very different kind of fight to the one against Aizen. This is intimate, it's personal, it's cruel. Aizen is the big bad at the end of the day. Fighting him is very much a good versus evil thing. As much as I love Aizen, it's considerably more typical, and I don't mind that. That's the role he played. I'm absolutely fine with that. But Kubo really dials it in for this arc and basically attacks Ichigo at his heart, where he lives at home. It doesn't get any closer than this. You know, Aizen threatens to destroy Karakura Town, but it's a very shonen bad guy threat at the end of the day. It's a big war to decide the fate of Ichigo's world. But here, the fate of Ichigo's world has seemingly already been decided. And by world, I mean his closest world. And this is what I mean when I say it's not hard to find yourself understanding where he comes from. When Ichigo and Ginjo escape all of them and find themselves in this little hideout that Ginjo himself has prepared, he basically says to Ichigo that he thinks that he's discovered Tsukishima's true ability. He thinks Book of the End allows him to manipulate the past, which is correct, essentially. And that Ichigo's friends now see him as someone they have always known. And Ichigo sweating, you know, he just looks awful, and he says to Ginjo in an act of, you know, Ichigo's lowest point, he says, will they go back to the way they were? Will I save them if I kill Tsukishima? And this is given clear importance in this chapter. And from the way it's drawn, it's just incredible. As far as I'm concerned, Lost Agent has the best character faces in Bleach, Kubo's best character face work ever. The emotion on show is just incredible. And we need to take a look at Ichigo as a wider character to understand why this is such a big moment for him. Ichigo is a fundamentally good person at heart, whose main drive has always been to protect those around him, to protect those that he loves and cares about. But he's not evil, he's not cruel, and he doesn't really have any inclination to be that way. He spares nearly every single enemy he fights. He heals Ikkaku after they fight. He heals Dordoni after they fight. And really, he just fights to win because he has to win. And then he'll move on. He's not vindictive or anything like that. There are obvious exceptions to this rule. Ichigo kills Ulquiorra, but that situation is completely out of his control. And Ichigo even professes after that fight that this isn't how he wanted to win. Obviously, Zangetsu takes over his body. The rage and instinct comes out and tears Ulquiorra apart, but it's clearly not Ichigo in control at that point. And then the only other exception to that rule is Aizen. With Mugetsu, Ichigo clearly goes for the kill against Aizen, in my opinion, because Aizen is split in half after that fight. But in my opinion, it almost doesn't count, because that's very much an act of duty. And that's something that Kubo is really playing with during that fight as it is. In that Aizen kind of says to Ichigo, I haven't injured any of your friends, you should have no reason to hate me, why are you fighting me? And it's because it's Ichigo's duty at that point to step up and, fight alongside the Shinigami against their common foe. And so for Ichigo to try and kill Aizen only makes sense. It's an act of war, they're in the middle of a war, and if Ichigo doesn't win this fight, Aizen will destroy everything he knows and loves. So to go for the kill makes complete sense as far as Ichigo being a soldier of the Gotei 13 goes in this instance. But here, this is a very personal, intimate situation against a human enemy, essentially. And Ichigo wants to kill him in cold blood because he hopes, he doesn't know, he hopes it will save his friends. And that's another important distinction. Ichigo knows that by killing Aizen, Karakura Town is safe. It is saved. Ichigo has no such guarantee that by killing Tsukishima, his friends will be freed from essentially their mind control, although it's not literally mind control. That is what's going on here. And so that's what, again, makes this scene so fascinating, is that it's a massive gamble on Ichigo's part as far as his conscience goes. I think it's important to remember as well that Ichigo is still, at the end of the day, just a kid. And for him to be backed into a corner like this is eye-opening. But I think the Fullbring arc does a fantastic job of really escalating to this point and pushing Ichigo into what seems like, from us as a reader, an inescapable corner. From the very beginning, the arc is playing on Ichigo's feelings of helplessness and powerlessness since losing his Shinigami powers. From the moment Uryu is attacked by Tsukishima, Ichigo is like, I can't do anything to help you, I can't save them. And Orihime is attacked, and something is going on that is pushing Ichigo to the point of despair, where he puts his trust in a man he doesn't fully trust to try and get his powers back. So there is a great moment when Ichigo is talking with Ginjo. It seems like they are at their wits' end. Tsukishima's grand plan has been revealed, and now the two of them are alone in Ginjo's final hideout, the last refuge for these characters to escape to. And Ichigo asks Ginjo flat out, if I kill Tsukishima, will things go back to the way they were? And I think I just need to bring up Kubo's artwork again. Kubo is making it very clear from the way Ichigo looks that if he was to go down this path, it would be a mistake. Ichigo looks like the villain in these panels. He looks angry, he looks desperate and evil with great shadow work. And that carries on as well into their actual confrontation. Ichigo looks crazed. Kubo does a great job of just drawing this sense of mania on Ichigo's face. Even in just small panels, you can see it. He doesn't look like himself. He looks mentally exhausted and just utterly terrified. But kind of willing to do whatever he thinks it takes. But when Ichigo says, if I kill Tsukishima, will they go back to normal? Ginjo says that, I don't know. And he basically flat out says, I don't know, however, right now it is our only course of action. As although we know the truth, to all of your friends and family right now, we look insane. And so knowing that we don't know if killing Tsukishima will set them free, can you go through with it? Could you kill Tsukishima in cold blood? And Ichigo opens his mouth to answer when Yukio arrives, and it's purposefully cut off. And what I think Ichigo was going to say here was yes. I think he was going to say, yes, I can do it. But the reason it's cut off is because Kubo spares him. He spares this child from condemning himself, in a sense. Now, obviously, Ichigo does threaten to kill Tsukishima later on anyway, but it's this moment of self-realization, I guess, when he's alone with Ginjo and Ginjo flat out asks him, it's just the two of them, they think, and Ichigo was going to reply, yeah, I can murder this guy. I have to do it. But, he's just a boy, and Kubo spares him that kind of no turning back moment, I guess, in a way. That seems to me why it's purposefully cut off from allowing Ichigo to actually confess that. So at the very end of the arc, we get the big final showdown, and Ichigo and Ginjo kind of confront Tsukishima at presumably his house. And the showdown is so original. This is what I mean. Like this arc does a great job, especially with its finale, of completely differentiating itself. You're never going to forget this, that's for sure. But Ichigo is just on the verge of murdering Tsukishima. Like, the moment Tsukishima opens the front door, Ichigo goes for him. He just, literally lunges at Tsukishima. Again, that crazed look in his eye, but Ginjo holds him back. And then we see all of Ichigo's friends and family are in there, and they're, celebrating Ichigo coming home, and they're realize the error of your ways. Say sorry to Tsukishima. And it's terrifying. I remember reading it. And thinking, obviously, this is going to turn out all right. But right now, I cannot see a way out. It's not the same as just fighting Aizen. Ichigo can probably train and overpower him. How do you defeat that which has seemingly already won, that has already taken Ichigo's friends and his family away from him? I actually applaud Kubo for going this route and for really pushing the boundaries of his main character. As far as shonen protagonists go, Ichigo has always come across to me as being quite down-to-earth, quite realistic in a sense, and you kind of have to put yourself in his shoes. How many of us out there would be willing to do whatever it takes to save those we care about in a situation like this, where Tsukishima isn't putting them in any obvious danger, but that's because he's already won. They're already on his side. And life will never be the same again unless you do something about this guy. And so I think Kubo does a wonderful job at just building and building to Ichigo's lowest point, turning him against everyone he has ever cared about. In this arc, you have the chapter Spotlight Brocken, which is a brilliant chapter where Ichigo begins to suspect not only Kisuke is turning against him, but also his own father, when in actuality they are working to help him behind the scenes. Now, there are a lot of things in the Lost Agent arc that are maybe a little bit annoying and could be explained away by characters just talking to each other. Like, why didn't Kisuke and Isshin just talk to Ichigo and be like, we're still on your side, we're building you a Zanpakuto that will get all your Shinigami powers back, don't fret. But then we'd lose all the precious drama. And that's what makes this arc, the end of this arc, so special. So if anyone does say to you, the Lost Agent arc, it's rubbish, it doesn't mean anything, it's a filler, waste of time, and they clearly haven't read it, I would obviously urge you to, just point them in the direction of this climax, because it's wonderful. It does crazy things for Ichigo's character. Kubo really pushes him to the brink. Like I've said, it's all about tearing him down and building him back up again, both literally in terms of his losing his full-bring powers when Ginjo is eventually revealed to have betrayed him as well, and he's just sobbing in the rain, and then getting his powers back again from Rukia, a moment of salvation, but also figuratively as well, in terms of pushing him to the point where he's willing to admit he would kill this man, when Ichigo so far has been adamant in preserving his enemies' lives, because he's not a killer at the end of the day. There's a big distinction between fighting out of a sense of duty in a war situation and this. And I love that Kubo does try and, I think, showcase that this is the wrong path for Ichigo to go down. Now, perhaps the only thing I don't like about this situation is it feels to me like Kubo kind of wrote himself into a corner with just how inescapable it seemed like Book of the End actually was. And it turns out that actually killing Tsukishima would solve all of their problems. And I don't know if I like that, because to me it kind of cheapens Ichigo's big decision to want to kill Tsukishima, because he could just kill him and then be like, everything's hunky-dory again. And I guess it's weird, because it's quite clear that after dying no one even remembers Tsukishima. So if Ichigo just killed him outside the house somewhere and then went back in, they wouldn't even know he was missing. I don't really like that in a way. It feels like Kubo was like, actually, how do I deal with the Tsukishima problem? Let's just kill him. And it works. It's fine. But it just feels a little bit like it cheapens Ichigo's big decision, because it feels like Kubo is saying you're going down the wrong path here. But actually, if you went through with it, it would be all right. So that's kind of annoying, but obviously there's a lot more going on here than just that. That's reducing it to its simplest form. Really, this is all about Ichigo and his inner conflict, the turmoil he's facing. If he had killed Tsukishima, yes, he would have saved his friends, but what would he have lost in the process? Definitely some of his humanity. And then, of course, later on it's revealed that Ginjo is actually the main villain of this arc. Tsukishima has been working for him the whole time, and it seems like Ichigo's final, most steadfast ally actually has betrayed him. But then Ichigo gets his powers back, the Shinigami return, and it seems like this arc is just a magnet for criticism, because people didn't really like this either. The Shinigami coming back feels a little bit like a Deus Ex Machina. It feels like Kubo, towards the end, or at the very least maybe Shonen Jump, felt that the arc couldn't carry itself to the finish line, and the Gotei 13 had to show up to boost the ratings. I think that's very disingenuous. I think that the Gotei were probably always going to show up. There's no doubt about it. I think this arc was quite clearly planned out from the get-go. And the Gotei are supposed to be Ichigo's saviors because he has saved them so many times in the past. And I think that works absolutely fine. I think that's totally fine. I think it makes complete sense. Rukia being the one to get Ichigo out of this terrible situation is brilliant imagery as well. And so, of course, Ginjo now is this rogue character who is revealed to have this connection to Ichigo because they're both substitute Shinigami. They've both, in a sense, been used by the Soul Society to some degree or another. And then Ichigo does kill Ginjo in their final battle. But again, this feels very different to before. It's portrayed very differently to before. In a sense, this kind of feels like Ichigo doing the right thing by Ginjo. Because Ichigo has gone through this awful hardship with Tsukishima, had this kind of moment of introspection where he's like, yeah, I would kill someone to save my family and friends. But he's come out the other side of it without having to dirty his hands in that way. And now, once again, you get this kind of like feeling of a sense of duty. He has matured. He seems almost like a proper adult in this scene where he just cuts Ginjo down. But it's not framed in a malicious way at all. It seems like Ginjo is caught in this endless cycle of hate. At this point, where it feels like Ichigo is very much the pariah early on when he was trying to save his friends, Ginjo is now very much out of step with everyone else. He is now the one on his own. And Ichigo kind of just puts him out of his misery, essentially. Like, Ginjo is on this endless spiral of revenge and hate, and there's no way of getting out of it. And Ichigo kills him. And Ginjo seems to harbour no ill will towards him for that either. The final scene of Ginjo in the manga is, or at least in the Fullbring arc, is beautiful. It is so well done. Like, Kubo's art is just on another level. Seriously, it's so good. Ichigo basically saying to Ginjo, like, our paths diverged, and I've made my choice, and I will stop you here and now to protect everyone. And that look on Ginjo's face where he's like, all right, let's do this. And from this point on, Ichigo just becomes more mature, I think. He takes a more mature attitude to everything, very in keeping with the themes and the tone of the arc, and he puts Ginjo down, essentially, because it's the only way out for this character. And even Riruka is able to realise that. She says, he saved Ginjo. Ginjo's the one who saved us, but Ichigo saved him from his eternal spiral of despair, essentially. This constantly going round and doing the same thing over and over, targeting people. It's never going to make him happy. It's never going to fulfill this need for revenge he has. And so Ichigo kind of, takes him out, one substitute Shinigami to another. It's a moment that I kind of wish Kubo had spent a bit more time with, given it a bit more time to marinate. I do think the final moment between Ichigo and Ginjo is near perfect, though, with Ichigo just looking down on him, no sense of triumph, but also no sense that he did the wrong thing. You know, he looks just very solemn, and Ginjo dies thinking like, maybe would our perspectives have been different if you'd been in that place and I'd been in your place. You know, would you have done the same as me? And it's a great moment between two people who finally understand each other and realize that they're not so different. But from this point on, Ichigo does seem to become a little more mature. Obviously, the 1,000-Year Blood War arc is very mature, just in general. It seems like Kubo took a lot of inspiration from this arc in terms of the tone of that arc. Now, obviously, it's a war arc, so it's not going to be ever really as intimate as this one, but Ichigo just seems very different. I always felt that Ichigo felt very different after this experience, and that makes a lot of sense. But I always felt that he approached situations and just felt more like an adult, kind of moving forwards. But yeah, so that's pretty much it, really, about Ichigo's absolute kind of lowest point. His admission that he is ready and willing to kill Tsukishima. He wants to kill him. He goes for him when they first meet each other. He cuts off his arm, and he just looks like he wants to kill him. But obviously, it's an emotional fight. But I always find it fascinating to talk and look at this sort of thing about how Tsukishima and, by extension, Ginjo are kind of the antithesis to Aizen in that sense, and that Aizen is more of a, you know, much larger scale threat, and these two are a much more personal thing, but it's these two that really drive Ichigo to despair, and how that affects him, how that affects his mental state, and just watching the climax of this arc really just build and build every single week in a way that is just gripping as a reader, not knowing how Ichigo's going to get out of this, and sympathizing with him to some degree, and just seeing how much this whole experience kind of changes him as well is fascinating to me. But that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the finale to the Lost Agent arc, to this final, you know, almost horror movie scenario that Ichigo finds himself in, that drives him to the point where he's willing to murder another human in cold blood, to take that first dangerous step down a potentially slippery slope. Let me know what you thought of Kubo's handling of Ichigo in this arc, and the development he receives, and the more intimate personal focus on him and his friends. Let me know what you thought of the Lost Agent arc in general, because I've always been an ardent defender of it. But, you know, I'm well aware I'm not blind, and I remember my experience back in the day. I remember people didn't really like it. So let me know where you stand with the arc as a whole. But until next time, guys, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.